A Minot man who prosecutors say tried to run over a deputy during a multi-county pursuit in February is now asking for a new attorney. Joshua Chambers appeared in court in Minot today for what was supposed to be a sentencing hearing. Chambers pleaded guilty in June to 9 charges across 2 case files, including attempted murder. Investigators say Chambers led deputies from McLean and Ward counties on a high-speed pursuit from Underwood all the way to downtown Minot in the morning of February 25th, and at one point drove towards a deputy before the pursuit ended in a crash near the downtown area. In court today, Chambers attorney David Dusek indicated that his client wanted a change of attorney and said his client does not understand the ramifications of the plea he made.
Because of the gravity of the case, I want him to be able to understand everything that's going on in the case, the ramifications of the plea agreement, not taking a plea agreement, make sure he understands that thoroughly.
Judge Richard Hager continued the sentencing to a later date. Hager also reminded Chambers that if the courts approve Dusek's withdrawal and he elects to have a court-appointed attorney, he would not be able to choose whichever lawyer he wants. Now, future hearings in the case have not yet been set. Chambers remains in custody in Minot on a $1 million bond.